Hello everyone, this is Major Green, also known as Nitpicking Nerd, and today once again I will be talking about the chase scene in Star Wars The Last Jedi, and I will be nitpicking it as well as coming up with excuses, possible ways to explain some of the strange stuff in it which seem to bug a lot of people. So I'm doing this just for fun, by the way. I know it's just a movie, but this is fun for me to do, and I hope it will be fun for you to listen to. And one of the most commonly asked questions, and it's also something I thought about when I watched it, is how come the First Order didn't simply use their hyperspace engines to simply jump ahead of the Resistance fleet to catch them from the other side? So this is a very interesting question, and I will try to answer it in this video. So how can we explain this? So one possible way is maybe Supreme Leader Snoke actually didn't want to catch the Resistance too fast. Maybe he wanted to eliminate them slowly. He wanted them to be desperate because maybe he thought that would help lure Rey and Luke Skywalker to him by basically abusing the Resistance in a sadistic way, putting them in such a position and gradually killing them all, not doing that too fast to allow time for Luke and Rey to come and try to save them. So that's one possible explanation, even though there was no indication of that in the movie. And it's kind of similar to what the Emperor did in episode 6. If you remember, he could have easily destroyed the rebels quickly, but he wanted to toy with Luke. He wanted to try to turn Luke to the dark side, and he showed him from the window, he showed how he slowly kills off the rebels. And this was specifically mentioned in that movie. It was said that there was a big fleet of the Empire, but he didn't engage the Resistance, and one of the admirals even said that he has direct orders from the Emperor not to engage the rebels, instead just to keep them from escaping. So that was the explanation in that movie for how come the superior Empire didn't simply wipe out the rebels. So this was basically all because of the overconfidence of the Emperor. He directly told them not to destroy the rebels too quickly because he wanted to toy with Luke and to try to turn him to the dark side, basically being sadistic and to slowly destroy the rebels in front of him. So it's possible that Snoke did the same thing here, even though it was never mentioned by anyone, and General Hawk seemed to be trying to finish the rebels as quickly as he could. So there was no indication that Snoke told him to take it slow. Maybe he did that telepathically. He did say something to Kylo about General Hawks being weak and easy to manipulate. And by the way, Snoke in many ways is kind of like the Emperor, a very similar kind of character. And he even looks like the original version of the Emperor, of how he was supposed to look like. In the original art for episode 6, the Emperor was supposed to be a very tall alien being. And then I guess for practical reasons, for budget reasons, they simply made him a human in makeup. But the original plan was to have him be some kind of tall alien. And so with Snoke, they essentially did kind of like the original version of the Emperor, what he was supposed to be. And he's very similar in many ways. He's kind of overconfident, which is his weakness, just like the original Emperor. And so maybe that's one way to explain it. Maybe he deliberately wanted to give them time to run away and to slowly chip them away, to slowly destroy them in order to lure Rey and Luke Skywalker into a trap, basically. But again, it was never mentioned in the movie, so this is just speculation. So now let's move to the practical reasons to try to explain why the First Order was so stupid in its tactics. Well, one way to explain it would be that maybe this whole chase scene was taking place outside of the normal hyperspace routes. This is something actually as one of my commentators told me in my video in which I complained about the map to Skywalker. I was saying how it doesn't make sense. Why would you need such a map showing you the road to get somewhere? Why not just show the final point? And then a few people pointed out to me that in the expanded universe of Star Wars it was explained, in the books, that there are actually hyperspace lanes, special pathways which I guess are clear from the breeze, in which ships can travel in hyperspace. And if you go outside of those lanes, then you basically are in danger. It's more risky to jump to hyperspace because of potential debris and stuff like that. And so it's possible that this whole chase scene is taking place outside of such a lane. And maybe that's why the First Order thinks it's too risky to try to hyperspace jump in this area. And maybe that's why they're so surprised later when the Resistance jumps at them. We do see some other ships jumping in and out of this region without problems seemingly, so maybe they simply took the risk. So that's one way to explain it. Maybe the bigger the ship, the riskier it is. So maybe the First Order simply didn't want to take that risk. Another thing to consider is that they didn't know that the Resistance doesn't have enough fuel to make more jumps. We know that. We saw the characters of the Resistance say that they only have fuel for one more hyperspace jump, but the First Order doesn't know it. Also, it came to my attention that apparently it's a totally different fuel that is used in the hyperspace engine. That's not the same fuel as is used for the normal propulsion. And there was a line by the First Order that they did say they somehow know how much fuel the Resistance has, but they probably meant the regular fuel, the sublight fuel. But maybe they don't know how much hyperspace fuel there is. And by the way, about that topic, does that make sense? I think it does, because maybe the hyperspace requires some kind of totally different kind of exotic matter as its fuel, you know, like the lithium crystals in Star Trek. So maybe they need something like that for the hyperspace jumps. It's something that cannot be read by sensors, and so the First Order had no idea that they have so little of it. And so they thought they would be able to jump into hyperspace anytime they want to, and so maybe they wanted to be positioned in the same exact direction so that they will be able to jump after them to whatever point they want to arrive at. And we know from all the other movies that all the ships in Star Wars always jump into hyperspace pointing directly forward, meaning whatever direction the nose of the ship is facing, that's exactly where you will jump. You cannot jump sideways or backwards or something like that. And so you have to be facing a specific direction in order to jump to it. And so maybe they suspected that the Resistance will try to jump again, and so they wanted to be facing in the same exact direction all the time, so that they can catch them immediately if they try to escape again. Because otherwise maybe they will try to hide somewhere in the other side, they will jump again, and then they will try to hide inside an asteroid field or a nebula, or behind some planets or moons or something. So maybe the First Order wanted to catch them as quickly as possible if they again try to jump somewhere. And so if they send some of their ships to the other side or sideways or backwards and back again, they would have to turn their ships around. And that takes some time. So let's say half of their fleet will jump ahead of the Resistance fleet. They will arrive in a very big distance. I also presume they cannot jump a very short distance. I mean, they're way too close. And so if they jump into hyperspace, it will be to a very long distance ahead of them. It's impossible to make two short jumps. There is some kind of minimum distance, I think. And so they would have to jump somewhere far and then back again. But it will take them time to turn their ship around and jump backwards. Well, the Resistance can use this opportunity to jump sideways. And then the First Order will be a little bit behind, because they will have to wait until their ships turn around and then try again to catch them. It's also possible a ship loses all its kinetic energy once it jumps into hyperspace. And so if they do that, they will have to pick up their speed from zero again. And so that's why they cannot do it while jumping backwards and then ahead again. So meaning they first have to turn around, they have to jump somewhere long enough behind, then again they have to turn around, wasting again time, and then they can jump to be right next to the Resistance. They will immediately fall back again. So this will be a useless exercise. They will be in a worse place in which they started. Because right now they are very close behind the Resistance, they are facing the same direction, meaning they'll be able to jump into hyperspace and catch them again instantly. But if they start sending ships elsewhere, either ahead or behind or sideways, they will be losing precious time turning the ships around and will have to accelerate again to try to catch the Resistance. So they were better off staying together and facing the Resistance directly to be ready to jump into hyperspace the moment the Resistance does. Because remember, they didn't know they have only enough for one more jump. The First Order didn't know that. They suspected they might be able to do a few more jumps, and so they were getting ready for that option. If they send a few ships ahead or sideways, then they basically split up their fleet, and each half of the fleet will be much weaker against the Resistance. The Resistance can keep doing that endlessly, and so the First Order will constantly be splitting up its forces and might be more vulnerable also to the Resistance. And so for this reason, maybe that's why they decided to keep the entire fleet together. Also, the Resistance was a few ships in the beginning. They had something like 4 ships, and so they might have been able to split up to different directions also, which would force the First Order to split their fleet up again even more. And so maybe that's why they didn't want to do that prematurely if they didn't have to. And so that's why they chose to simply chase them in sublight speed until they ran out of fuel, and they're constantly ready to jump into hyperspace behind them. And that's why they wanted to be facing the same way as all those ships. As for the question of how come they didn't simply call for reinforcements from other ships in the galaxy, maybe they did, but it takes a few days to arrive. We don't know exactly where they are in the galaxy, We do know that travel time in this galaxy is pretty fast. It's much faster than in Star Trek, for example, but it might still take a few days, and so maybe they did call for reinforcements, but they did not arrive yet. This whole movie seems to be taking place in about 2 or 3 days at most, and so maybe the reinforcements are on the way and simply didn't arrive yet. We also know that the First Order is currently trying to conquer the whole galaxy, so probably they are engaged in various battles across the galaxy, and so maybe they don't want to devote too many ships for this small target, which they think they will catch anyway, because they're too busy across the galaxy. There was some mention of other battles, fleet battles across the galaxy, and Rey said something about it will take a few weeks for the First Order to take over the galaxy, so they are not done yet, and so maybe they're a little bit busy with other enemies, and so that's why they don't want to devote more ships to this chase. Maybe they don't even consider this last bit of a resistance to be much of a threat to them, and so maybe that's why they don't bother calling for more ships from other places. And as I said, maybe this whole region of space, maybe it's have some problems with hyperspace. Maybe that's why they were so surprised when Admiral Holdo tried to ram them. Maybe they didn't expect them because this whole region is dangerous for hyperspace, even though we did see Finn and Rose jump into hyperspace and Rey arrive in hyperspace. And something else I wanted to say about the fighters. One of the questions about this chase scene is how come the First Order only sends a few fighters against the Resistance? Why not send a lot more? And I think one of the reasons might be because not all fighters have their own hyperspace engines. The Resistance will use the opportunity to immediately jump into hyperspace, and because most of the fighters don't have their own hyperspace engines, that means they will have to turn around, return to their motherships, and only then the motherships will be able to jump into hyperspace after the Resistance, and the Resistance will be able to use that time to try to hide somewhere on the other side, meaning in a nebula or an asteroid field or behind some planets or something like that. So the First Order didn't want to give them that opportunity to try to hide, and they didn't want to leave all their fighters behind, and so they needed the fighters, and that's why they didn't launch all of them. So maybe they launched only the ones which have their own hyperspace engines, so that's why the Kylo Ren probably did have one, but the rest of their fighter fleet simply didn't have engines, and so they will have to go back to their ship if the Resistance uses that opportunity to jump to hyperspace. Then they will have to wait for all the fighters to return before they can jump to hyperspace again to chase them again. And maybe that's why the First Order didn't launch more fighters. Maybe they only launched the ones which have their own hyperspace engines. So Kylo Ren's fighter and a few others. Or maybe those were the only ones who can pass through shields. Maybe not all fighters can do that. Maybe it requires some kind of ultra advanced countermeasures. And so maybe they only sent the ones which can. And also it was stated that once the Resistance was out of range of their weapons, they could no longer protect their fighters. So I guess their fighters were very vulnerable if they were outside of the range. Maybe they extend shields to protect them or something, and once it's past that range, those shields are also not effective. So anyway, that might be part of the explanation why they didn't send more fighters. They didn't want to give that opportunity to the rebels to try to escape while their fighters are outside their ships. And that way they will have to jump without all their fighters. So that would be a very, very big strategic mistake. So I think I covered everything I wanted to say. So this is my explanation for how come the First Order didn't try to hyperspace jump ahead of the Resistance. Mostly because they didn't know that the Resistance doesn't have enough fuel. They probably thought they would be able to jump to hyperspace at any moment. Maybe they are waiting for the exact right moment. So maybe they are waiting for us to release all our fighters against them, and then they will do that. Or they are waiting for us to split up our forces and to have part of our ships turning around, wasting time, wasting our kinetic speed. And so that's probably why they didn't want to do that, and that's why they remained in formation, pointing their noses at exactly the same direction as the Resistant ships. And that way, if the Resistance tries to jump somewhere, they'll be able to follow right away and not allow them to hide. So that's my explanation for why the First Order didn't try to do this. I'm sure there are many more ways to try to explain it, so I'll be glad to hear them. Let me know in the comments below if you have more ideas. Let me know what you think about my ideas, and we can continue the discussion in the comment section. And let me know if you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like, please subscribe, check out my other videos, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.